Welcome back. We are doing another fun episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Today, we have fantasy author Nevah Ann joining us. Welcome, Nevah. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so glad you could make it. Um, we seem to run in similar circles, but we haven't officially met until today, which is kind of fun for me. And I've not discovered your books yet, so I'm super excited to hear you read today. Um, Tell me a little bit about your writing journey and what really keeps you going at this craziness. Because, as you know, you got to be a devoted soul to the creative life if you're going to take this on. So, what was it that first made you say, "Yes, I have to write books"?
So when I was younger, I got into a fight with my friends, and so I wrote a nonfiction story about what really happened. And by nonfiction, I mean it was completely all lies. And I gave it to them, and they read it and they laughed and thought it was the best thing that I've ever written, which upset me at the time because it was not meant to be funny. But they said they loved it so much that they wanted me to write more. And so I started off writing contemporary. I've kind of messed a little bit in every genre, but once I hit fantasy, I've kind of stuck. Fantasy's just been my thing. And I wanted to tell stories that I can't find out there. And I wanted to tell stories that had a lot of characters that have struggles, but eventually find their way and find their families.
Awesome. So did you find that as you progress through your writing that you continue to quote unquote punish real people in your books?
There are some of my later things that are a little bit darker, where definitely I am punishing the bad guys. Sometimes I punish the good guys a little bit more than I probably should, but I do tend sometimes to write a little bit on the darker side, and so there is some definitely punishments in a lot of my
Do
stories.
do real people seep into your work like they did when you were a child, or is it all imagination at this point?
I always tend to pull a little bit of some people in. I take a lot of inspiration from names and things like that. And so, like, I'll meet someone and be like, "Oh, I love that name," and I'll jot it down, and somewhat will come up into the story. Or I'll meet someone and I'll be like, "Oh, I really hate how this person acts when they do this," and that will kind of show up into one of the stories. I've not put a real person fully into one of my stories in a long time, but there's aspects of people that I've met everywhere in them.
Perfect. So the story you're going to read today is Double-Edged War, Holding Ground, and this is book one of the Ruins of War series. And you co-wrote it with another author. How did you find that collaboration process? Did you do it face to face across the table? Did you exchange emails? Was it a challenge or was it something that came naturally to you?
My co-author and I actually met in college. We were in a creative writing class together, and when I first met her, I did not like her at all.
Yeah.
I thought she was pretty stuck up, and she was a teacher's pet. But then we had to write stories because it was a creative writing class, and we ended up sitting next to each other. And I found out that she liked some of the same things I did, and so she asked what I was going to write about, and I kind of gave her the idea of the story, and she loved it. And so she went and asked the instructor if we could write the story together. And he said, well, it's a separate project, so each story has to be different. And so we pitched the idea of, can we tell the same story from different points of view? And he's like, yeah, I need 20 pages. And so by the end of the class, we had 110 pages.
Wow.
We gave him our 20 and said, would you like the rest of it? And then from there, we met as often as we could, and we kind of sat next to each other and just bounced ideas off each other, kind of co-wrote the story next to each other. And then it just became this big giant thing. And when it got finished, we're like, oh, this is actually really good. So we published it and dedicated it to our instructor, and said, here's your 20 pages plus, yeah, a handful more.
Plus a handful more. So did you find that collaboration process um easier than working on your solo projects, or did you find it harder to work with another author?
It was a little harder at first because the idea was mine and the characters were mine and the world was mine. And so trying to get her on board, but then also realizing that she is a co-author. And so now the world has become hers as well, and taking some of her suggestions and her ideas. It started off a little harder than I wanted it to. And there were times when it's harder. And we found writing the second book has also come into that issue because I have an idea of where it should go and she has an idea of where it should go, but I like having that collaboration back and forth because we do keep each other on track. Um, so I think in some aspects it's harder, but it's also easier. We keep each other accountable and we say,
Yeah,
okay,
I
this
would
needs to
imagine
get
the
done.
accountability part is really helpful to have a
Oh, yes.
co-writer to say, hey, you didn't do your 20 pages. You got,
Right.
right? Yeah. Yeah,
So that part's
I would imagine the procrastination monster is kept at bay when you have a co-author.
yes, definitely.
Awesome. I'm really interested to hear this story. Can you give us a little bit of a synopsis before you begin to read?
So the story we wrote back in 2014, and it's written in the future. I think 2044 is about where we start. And the world hit a pandemic in 2020, which, by the way, we are very sorry for that. We did not mean to predict that.
I don't think you
Um,
did, but okay.
oh, good. And so the world hits a pandemic, and then there is a lot of conflict in the government, and there's fighting. And then we go into a civil war, and the United States goes into another Great Depression. And so, in order to survive, they sell off states. So, first they sell off states to different countries, but then the supernatural step forward and they purchase states. So, the vampires purchase a state and rename it to Sidrea. And then the dragons come out and they purchase a state. While this causes the humans, of course, to be like, whoa, hold on. There's supernaturals in this world. And so the vampires are trying to show that they can coexist with the humans, and so the book is about the prince, Aldis, who says, I've got this idea to take a human and put them in the vampire school and show that we can coexist and we can live together. So Holding Ground is from Aldis's cousin Endymion's point of view. And he is set to protect this human and make sure that the human doesn't get eaten.
Oh, it's a good thing.
Right?
Okay, awesome. This sounds completely new to me. I don't think I've ever heard a story quite crafted this way before. I mean, we've obviously seen vampire and werewolf and all kinds of different lore stories, but I think this is a new approach. So I'm kind of interested to see what you two have done with it. When you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud from Double-Edged War Holding Ground.
Okay. So I'm going to actually start with chapter 2, because this is when you find out the arrangement that gets made into Endymion being able to be in charge of keeping the humans safe. Endymion wasn't a huge fan of his uncle's advisor. Sure, the guy was smart and could do his job well, but he was also a jerk. He was always trying to get Endymion into trouble, even when half the time it wasn't something he had done. Hey, Devon, he greeted the fellow vampire. Endymion, Devon dismissed, turning instead to Aldis. Endymion rolled his eyes. Jerk. Didn't even think he had to address Aldis in the proper fashion, even though they were out in public and his cousin was the crown prince of Sidrea. Aldis nodded toward a chair. Join us, Devon. We were just discussing the humans. You have training. Devon sat. But where? Aldis finished off his blood-laced alcohol. Endymion seems to think the humans don't know how to read. Devon ordered another round before addressing Endymion. Why would you think that? I've met some pretty intelligent humans. Which ones? The humans that go into war with themselves and destroy one of their biggest countries? Or the ones that sell off land to get back on top and now are worse off for it? Endymion questioned. I didn't say they were all smart. Besides, how many mistakes have we made in our history? Devon asked. Nothing like that, Endymion shrugged. We didn't go into a huge genocide or 3 world wars. No, but centuries ago we decided we wanted to wipe out the dragons. Remember that story your mom told us? The huge cover-up to keep humans from noticing? Aldis countered. That wasn't one of our better moments. I remember, Endymion nodded. But just think of the mistakes they've made. I mean, just 9 years ago, your father purchased the state because the economy was crashing down around them. That was good for us. We were finally able to go back to our own traditions. We don't have to hide who we are. We don't have to move around when they notice how slow we're aging, Aldis reminded. Well, now they want to kill us instead, and we have to prepare for war. Endymion leaned back. I don't know if it was worth it. At the beginning, it seemed like the best move they could make, but now he wasn't so sure. Well, that's why we're trying to prevent war with them. Lyrie's already in battle. We want to keep it from spreading. Devin took a drink, which is why we were in our meeting, to find a way to show that we can coexist with humans. You talked to the participant? Aldis glanced at Devin, who nodded. That's great. Mr. Lander and I spoke with him earlier. The details have been set. We just need to figure out who's going to show him around. Devin smiled at Endymion, which, Mr. Lander suggested, might be you. Show who around? Endymion stared at the pair. The new student, Aldis replied. Will they be starting on Monday? Devin nodded. His name's Kaelin. Kaelin? Well, that's a cool name. Endymion smirked. Sure. I'll show him around. Why me, though? He couldn't figure out how this was a punishment. I figured Mr. Lander wouldn't want my bad behavior to spread. Aldis grinned. He's not from around here. Devin pulled a folded pack of papers from his pocket and slid it across the table. Endymion skimmed the legal documents. Why is he getting paid to go to school? Endymion flipped a few pages and looked at the signatures. There were 6. The King's, Aldis's, Principal Lander's, Devin's, Samuel Packard, and then Kaelin Rowan Arlington. A blank line sat under the students. Endymion eyed them. I missed something. It's something we're trying, Devin started. To show we want peace, Aldis finished. He leaned over and flipped the page back on the contract. Endymion read. In agreement with the treaty made between King Maedid of Sidrea, Governor Samuel Packard of Nevada, and Mayor Hank Williams of McDermott, one student transferred to Rivendell's Academy for the remainder of the year as a show of peace. Should the year go without incident, the student will return to finish out their high school, and more shall transfer over from River's End. Endymion's head snapped up. Wait, the students from River's End? We're having a human into the school? Have you all gone insane? Several people turned to stare. Aldis emptied his second drink. Not insane, and stop yelling. He'll get drained first day. Whoever's stupid enough to agree to this is just plain. Endymion paused to think of a stronger word. Stupid. That seemed to sum it up. He won't get drained. He'll have someone with him to assure he's safe from harm, like a guide and a protector. Devin grinned, which is where you come in. Me? Endymion shook his head, now seeing Mr. Lander's threat of punishment. No way. Make Aldis babysit the bloodbag. We're not putting our heir into harm's way like that, Devin declared. I'm an heir too, Endymion glared at his cousin. Everyone seems to be forgetting that. It's not just that, Aldis frowned. When do I have time? Between school, trainings, meetings, agreements, gatherings, I'd never be able to give this kid the time he needs to feel safe. Besides, I know you're best for the job. They trust you at school. They know not to mess with you, and they look up to you. Aldis smirked, which is why the fires always upset Mr. Landers. Fires? Devin questioned, his eyes traveling between them. Why would I want to associate myself with a human? Endymion changed the topic. You know how much press this is going to get? The questions, the stalkers, the attacks, all of those eyes on him. I'm aware. And I'm not saying I'm not going to be with you on this, cousin, but he'll need someone to stick by him. Aldis leaned over to rest a hand on Endymion's shoulders. This could be huge. If this happens, and we show them we can coexist, we won't go into a war. We can try to get the other states to see we aren't horrible. We can stop the war in Lyrae. Endymion sighed. And what do I get out of this? I mean, besides my look being turned head down and all that. Your own car? Devin said. Both boys turned. You agree to help this human, and we'll get you your own car. Aldis raised an eyebrow. Really? Endymion smirked. My pick? Sure, Devin nodded. I want a blue convertible. The new Porsche, with those awesome seats and that great sound system built in. The car cost a small fortune. There was no way they agreed to buy him one in exchange for showing some human around. Deal. Devin slid him a pen. Sign, and I'll get you one by Sunday. Aldis glared at Devin. There wouldn't be any change. any chance of his cousin agreeing to this. But when Endymion stared at Devon, dear gods, he was serious. Having his own car meant he didn't need to rely on his cousin. He would be good to go out on the weekends. It meant freedom. Endymion glared at the contract. It meant his time at school would be spent with some human. It couldn't be too bad. Endymion picked up the pen and added his name below the humans. Endymion Ilan Amor. He pushed it back to Devon. Great. Devon took the contract and returned it to his pocket. So I'll have my new car by Sunday? Yes. Devon picked up his drink and took a sip. Oh, and the kid wants to commute. He didn't take the offer for the house here, so you'll have to go get him from his house in McDermott and make sure he gets back after 2. Endymion glared. He should have known that there was a catch. And that's it.
Nice. Okay, I'm intrigued. This is going to be interesting to see how this story goes. I'm very curious to see how you will layer character and lore and politics. Those 3 levels. How much research did you have to do, and specifically what type of research to write this book?
So when we were determining what states were getting purchased, and who was purchasing them, we had to kind of go back a little bit and see like if there had been interest before. We had to see kind of what states we thought they would sell off first, who would start picking things up quickly. So it was a lot of back history of like where our states came from and kind of the history of where we started from. And then there was a little bit of history of what we thought went into having to sell off states, what that looked like, what states you could sell off before you kind of broke the United States apart a little bit. So we started with like Alaska and Texas and kind of those border states, but then we started looking into some of the middle states that got sold. So we had to kind of look into what that factor would be and if there were routes to make sure you could stay in the United States with some of those states sold, and still
So
kind of travel.
when you were writing this, it sounds slightly prophetic, right? The pandemic and another world war and a civil war. Did you find that those elements came naturally, or did you plot the thing and specifically design the book in that way?
So we kind of, when we first wrote it, we kind of determined that we wanted to make sure that the United States were still like in a depression. So we looked at a lot of the depression stuff and kind of built the world around that. And then kind of looked at what had happened like after big wars like that. And so we kind of built a lot of that. But we kind of always knew that it was going to be the supernatural states were better off and the human states were a little bit like not as better off. When you see the human states, you see a lot of differences between the 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of had that built in. There's a little bit of that in this. There's definitely going to be more in the second book because in the second book you go to Lyrie where they are actively battling the humans. So you get to see a little bit more of that in Lyrie when you get to the second book.
And I would imagine in the second book more layers about the governmental procedure and how things are actually run.
Yep.
Okay, cool. That's very intriguing. I'm intrigued because I am in process of writing a 4-book political thriller. So
Oh, nice.
I'm very interested to see how you're going to weave these elements in, because we all influence each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So I'm very curious. I'm adding it to my TBR so that I can see what you guys do. I'm very excited to have met you, and I hope that you will come back with your other books and read again for me.
Hopefully maybe next time I'll come back and you can see Taking Flight, which is the other side of the Holding Ground. It's from the human's point of view. So maybe I'll come
Fantastic.
back and read a little bit of that one.
That would be great. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.